So thank you for agreeing to do this. And I have a bunch of questions. So if it's okay, and we'll move fairly quickly, if I know you've got a time limit. So again, as I said, sort of just before I started recording, you are one of my favorite directors because I think you know how to tell a story. And one of the things I particularly like about your work, John Lee, is that you're telling true stories. A lot of things are like, to me, that makes a story much more powerful. Last night I watched The Rookie, which I had never seen before. And again, brought a tear to my eye. I'm like, why am I tearing up over this? Because you really do know how to tell a story. So before we talk about your films, maybe you can talk a little bit about how you got into film. I know you were studying law. I believe you're a lawyer by trade, and maybe you can sort of kind of walk us into that first.
Sure. I had an English degree from Baylor University and didn't quite know what to do with it. I'd been writing a lot of short fiction, some published in university, periodicals and things like that kind of stuff. Nothing of any high acclaim. And even though I loved writing, I didn't know that I could make a living as a writer. And I had been accepted to law school. So I went to law school, which I don't necessarily recommend because in my position, I was doing it just to buy some time, to buy 3 years and see kind of maybe if that's what I wanted to do. And also it got people off my back. And they could say, what are you doing? I go, I'm going to law school. They go, oh, that's great. Fantastic. Good for you. That said, I enjoyed law school, certain classes more than others. Constitutional law was probably the favorite class I'd ever taken, from the time I started school as a kid. And I realized it was because almost all important cases before the US Supreme Court are 5-4 decisions or 6-3 decisions, which tells you that smart people can disagree about things. And also every case had a story behind it, and actual people. And that, I don't know, I found myself drawn to that more than trust and estates or oil and gas law or those kinds of things. So long story short, I, got into my third year, my final year of law school, and started interviewing. And I was interviewing across the board. I mean, whether it was FBI, Goldman Sachs, law firms, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I just wanted to sit down with people and talk. And I took a job with a really good firm in Houston, Texas, and then practiced law there for about three and a half years, something like that. And during that time, I kind of fell in love. I'd already been in love with movies, but I fell in love with the idea of actually trying to write a movie. And back then, you couldn't go to a bookstore and find screenplays or how-to books on how to write a screenplay or any of that. There was no real film section in bookstores. So I was kind of self-taught as a writer. You try to get your hands on a script wherever you could, which was difficult in Houston. It was easier out here. And wrote my first screenplay, which wasn't very good, but it was complete. I wrote 120 pages or whatever it was, and I was interested in seeing if I could make a living at that, even though that seemed like a long shot at the time. Sundance Institute was setting up a satellite program to reach out to different cities. Now it's included like different countries they go to for different seminars and things like that, just to expand their brand. And one of the first ones they had was in Austin, Texas, which is kind of a hotbed of creativity. And there were indie filmmakers there and things like that. So I wanted to sign up. It was like a 4-day seminar kind of thing with different speakers, including Bill Whitliff and John Sayles and other, kind of heroes of mine. They also had a separate thing going, which was for, I believe, 8 people, where it was going to be an intensive screenwriting workshop with Frank Danielle, who had been the head of the film school at Columbia and then at USC. And I believe that he may have been one of Roman Polanski's film teachers in Poland. I don't know, but he was well thought of. And you had to send in, first you sent kind of a query letter, announcing that you wanted to try for this. And then the next thing, and you laid out kind of what your story was. And then the next step was, if you made it past that one, the next step was send any 10 consecutive pages of your script, which sounds easy, but is hard because you go, should I send the first 10? But these consecutive 10 are the best, but will they be confusing and all that? So anyway, I sent in 10 pages and they came back and said, okay, you've made it to the next round, send in the whole script. I sent in the script. They called and said, you're in. So I thought, this is fantastic. And so I went to Austin, and Frank Danielle proceeded to just rip all of us apart in the best way possible, I might say. He was quite a film scholar. And he would take half a day with each of our scripts and just go through. And it's kind of, what were you thinking? You can do better. Why did you do this? How come you didn't foreshadow? All these things that we would talk about. So I came out of the long weekend thinking two things. One, I've got to get a lot better. And two, somebody thinks I have enough promise or talent to perhaps engage in this. So I took that as a yes, and started making plans to leave the practice of law in Houston. Gave 6 months notice, cleared off my desk, talked to the senior partners, and then packed up my car and moved to Los Angeles. I was thinking about either Los Angeles or New York, and I had lots of friends in New York and kind of nobody I knew in California. And so for that reason, I came to California. I think more because it was more movie related, and two, when I was in New York, I could find tons of friends to hang out with and talk about anything except for movies, where I figured in Los Angeles, if I were lucky enough to start PAing and working around people, there'd be a lot more people that were trying to do the same thing that I was trying to do. So I moved to California, had one contact number for a production manager for commercials, and started doing PA work. And I worked on commercials mainly. Did one movie, I believe, in New York. But commercials were better for me because I could work for 2 weeks and cover my nut. I could pay the rent and electricity and everything and food, and then have 2 weeks to write, because I knew I just had to keep writing and get better. And then I was doing lots of myriad odd jobs and stuff just to pay the bills. But I had a theater company. It wasn't mine, it was ours. It was 4 buddies, and I would write and direct plays with them in mind. I would write to them, and then we would fill out the cast with other young actors around town. And that was really, really great. I mean, it was a 30-seat theater. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was really great to write and then have something performed and then move on to the next. It gave you a sense of completion, which was good. I got an agent for playwriting when one of the plays, received nice notices in the LA Times. And then from there, just kept writing screenplays. And one of the odd jobs I had was I was a script reader for an agency called Triad, which is no longer around because they merged with William Morris way back when. But they were a big, top 4 agency. And so I would read scripts and books and cover them, to make money, but also to stay aware of everything that was going on in the industry, what movies are being made, those kind of things. And through that, someone contacted me. They read some of my coverage, one of the senior partners, and thought I was a good writer. And so he asked me if I had any scripts. And I said, yes, I have one. And I had just finished doing a rewrite on it, and I was prepared to hand it out to people. And he said, if you'll get it to me by tomorrow, I'm leaving for a 3-week trip to Europe, and I will read it on the plane. And it just so happened that I had the script ready to go. So, I couldn't email, there was no email yet, him the script. So I had to go home, get the script, make a copy, drive it back over, deliver it to his office. And true to his word, he read it and he liked it, and he passed me along as a pocket client to Rhonda Gomez, who is still a great friend, and she's retired as an agent, but was a great agent. And kind of from there, a perfect world. I wrote A Perfect World, and it got made. And from that point on, I've been working. That was that was too long, but that's kind of the spin of it.
No, it wasn't too long at all. It was excellent. I've taken notes here. By the way, you will get hopefully to the Alamo later on, but on the poster there behind you, did you know there's a connection to the law school you went to the Alamo? Did you know that William Travis's son went
Travis,
and
yes,
did a law degree at Baylor?
I did know that, and he's in the movie.
Oh, I didn't know he's in the movie.
William Travis. Well, it's yes, he has to leave his son.
That's right.
Has to leave his son behind, and that's I did know that, but it's been a long time. You'll have to remind me. You're going to know more about the Alamo than I do now. I promise.
Well, I want to keep it fairly general. I have got so many questions, and again, I so appreciate your time. So it's interesting you talk about directing plays, because we interviewed another guest speaker is a director, and she also started in theater, and it's an interesting place to start. So here's the thing: if I wanted to be an American big Hollywood director, right? Like you said, you wrote the script. Look at that face. That tells me everything.
Mm-hmm.
Like it seems like there's a team, and then there's everybody else. And I want to talk to you a little bit about your transition over to some stuff for Netflix and maybe why you did that. But to direct for like a Disney or a big studio is a big deal. And not just to direct once for Disney, but they clearly like your work and they keep bringing you back. Do you think you have to be a writer in order to be a director? Like it seems like a lot of people I know that direct also write, and they kind of option their own films.
Yeah, I mean, there are many ways to skin that cat. There are a lot of really, really fabulous directors who would tell you that they're not great writers. They, are interpreting a script in a way that's kind of brilliant and great. There are other people that do write, and that helps them. And for me, there's sometimes I want to write something that I go, I don't want to direct this. I just want to write it. There's somebody out there better than me to direct this. Other times I've had, several great situations with scripts that I didn't write, but I wished I'd written. Right. But I felt like I had insight and, the necessary skills to make them work in a good way. So I've had lots of different experiences, but I think that, what does it take to be a director in Hollywood? It's like make them, want to hire you. And I know it's a catch-22 because it's hard to get hired, but John Sayles told me way back when in Austin, he said, if you want to be a director, direct. If you want to be a writer, write. He said, he goes, I've gotten 4 buddies together, on a Sunday night when a restaurant was closed, and I've written, scenes that I've shot in there just because I needed to direct. And you have to do that. And then, and then you direct shorts and things like that. And then unfortunately it's hard. Shorts should be more representative of someone's talent. They really should, but I think shorts get overlooked a lot. I have, friends that have won Academy Awards for directing short films that had real trouble getting the film to direct. So it's about whatever you can do at whatever level to get your movie out. And thankfully there are different, festivals and things like that really celebrate and reward, smaller movies. You look at this year's Academy Awards, and there are several Best Picture nominees that are small movies that, were done on a shoestring, but that had great creative insight.
So like you talk about a story, and a part of it is ideas. Somebody said there's only so many narratives. There's only so many stories out there. And one of the things that I said just before I started recording is, how to grab it. How to tell a story. Like I watch a lot of movies, and you are one of the best. And I say that not to flatter you. And that's one of the reasons I reached out to you, is because you tell true stories really well. And I want to talk about maybe, like, yes, there's embellishments, because, there's the Hollywood real versus real. There's those websites you can look at what you said and what actually happened. You've done a lot of them. You did The Founder. I'm interested to know what McDonald's, if you can still eat there. You worked for Disney. You did the one with Saving Mr. Banks. I mean, it's like you tell some interesting stories. The Highwayman, like who would think of telling Bonnie and Clyde from the view of the two Rangers? Now, are these things that just come to you in your sleep, or like, do you find these people, or like, how do you find good people?
Well, all three of those you just mentioned, actually, if you include The Rookie as a fourth real life film,
With
they
Jim
were all
Morris, yeah.
yeah, they were all written by someone else. I didn't write them. Now, that's not to say that sometimes you don't roll up your sleeve a little bit and go, I'm going to play with this a little bit more or whatever. But you know, with almost all of them, there was the script was there, and I would have discussions with the writer about ways to soup something up or whatever. But yeah, I mean, and I almost always, like, for instance, the you know, Saving Mr. Banks came along, and it was a well thought of script. Kelly Marcel is a brilliant writer, and Disney sent it to me because they thought, you know, they said, we'd love for you to consider directing this. And we're meeting with directors. We're currently meeting with different directors on a short list of directors that we think would be great for this. And I said, I remember saying, one, I've got another movie, which was The Highwayman, which didn't make at that point, made later. So I'm tied to that one. But two, I'm not really a musical guy. And I'm not even that much of a fan of the movie Mary Poppins and all that. And my agent said, look, here's the thing. Just read 20 pages and you'll know whether it's, you know, it's catching you or not. And I opened that script. And then by the time I finished it, I said, oh my gosh, I've got to do this. I'll throw my hat in the ring for sure. I went in and met with them, talked to them. It was great. And the producer, Allison Owen, was fantastic. But I still said, I can't do it. I want to do this, but I can't do it right now because it looks like The Highwayman's going to go. And I've been attached to it for many years. And they said they understood. I believe it was literally the next day The Highwayman fell apart.
Wow.
Liam Neeson was going to do it, and then he fell out.
Wow.
And so then I got a call from Disney saying, you know, good news, bad news. I mean, sorry to hear about your movie falling apart, but are you interested? And I said, yeah. And it was a glorious experience. So yeah, all those ones. I mean, and the founder came along and I said, oh my gosh, no, I don't want it. Ray Kroc, McDonald's, really? This seems like a reach. I've already done a bunch of real life people. I don't want to be that guy because Hollywood is desperate to put you in a rut. Like, oh, he only does sports movies or he only does real life, you know, American movies. But I read it and I really, really enjoyed Rob Siegel's script because I thought it was the most unique script I'd probably ever read, in that you started off, you know, pulling for Ray Kroc. He is the guy, he's the hardworking guy who just busts his ass, and he's Willie Loman, you know, and you want him to succeed because he works so hard and he needs it, wants it, and all that. And then about halfway through, things start to change a little bit, and you go, I'm not sure I would have done that. Do I still like him? And by the end, you feel complicit in his rise as he oilier and oilier. And so I thought that was really a high wire trick to be able to pull for someone for a half the script and pull against them actively for the second half. Whereas, you know, if it's Death of a Salesman, Willie Loman takes over the world in this one.
You know, and that's a great, first of all, if I can just say this, my mother loves Mary Poppins. I mentioned she's forgetting, her memory's going, and she'll play Mary Poppins on a loop. So so I do put on the Saving Mr. Banks because it's Mary Poppins related and she knows the author. So thank you for that. It gives us a bit of a relief. So she enjoys that film. But it's interesting, actually, in that film, it was, I guess, BJ Novak and Jason Schwartzman are at the piano and they go up when she's sliding down, or up instead of down with the music.
Yeah.
It's sort of opposite the way you think it should go. You do that with your films, and I like the way you do that. And I want to talk about the other Schwartzman, John Schwartzman, in a bit too. But I also just wanted to say with that particular film, like McDonald's. Okay, so when Disney asks you to do Saving Mr. Banks, clearly it puts Walt Disney in it. He looks great, right? He really looks like. I mean, I love Tom Hanks, but he really plays the part well. But Ray Kroc is. I love McDonald's, but boy, that guy looks like a monster by the end. And you do some brilliant things with your films. And one of my favorite part of any true story is at the end, you know, when there's the words come up and they tell you what happens. I love how you bring in, like with the PJ Travis, you brought in the audio reel of her talking and kind of critiquing. You use live pictures of things, and to see Ray Kroc in his own words kind of claim that he started this whole company. It's quite something. Was there a lot of pushback? Like when you do a real story, you open yourself up to, people criticizing you, right? And
no,
and attacking you.
you're always going to have that. You're always going to have it. I mean, with Saving Mr. Banks, it was a script that was written outside the studio system. Alison Owen and Kelly Marcel in London they were looking at, there was a script written by an Australian writer that was a biography of P.L. Travers, kind of a cradle to grave. And it was based on a book that they had the rights to, and they weren't getting any traction in Australia. So they reached out to Alison to see, because P.L. Travers had life both in Australia and in London. And they thought, well, maybe this could be a BBC thing. We could work this out. So they sent the script, which I never read, but I'm sure I'm told it's very good. But they just felt like that biographies that were cradle to grave were not only out of vogue, but a little boring for modern audiences. And both Kelly and Alison grabbed onto one very small section of that life story and thought there was something there. And that was the 2 weeks that P.L. Travers spends in Los Angeles. That intrigued them. So they said, okay, let's try over just concentrating on those 2 weeks, and we can have flashbacks or make it seamless where we can see part of her childhood so we understand the consequences of this to her and changing the story and things like that. But it was all developed and written outside of Disney. And in fact, when they were writing it and they were calling it Saving Mr. Banks, they said, well, here's the thing. You have to put in the music and you have to have Mickey Mouse and all these things. Mm-hmm. We don't have the rights to any of that. And Disney has never granted those rights and never will. So they decided that they were going to go for it anyway, just to see. And so she wrote the script. Disney heard about it. And my understanding is that they sent a cease and desist letter to Alison saying, we understand you're developing a script called Saving Mr. Banks. Mr. Banks is completely ours. Stop it. And so the script was written and it got on the blacklist, and other different people that started reading the script and really liked it. And at Disney, to their credit, I mean, this would have, if this had been developed inside the walls of Disney, it would have been very, very different. Because I think while Walt Disney is Walt Disney, he's portrayed as a human, not a god in this. And he has flaws. And, we see him every day at 5, he gets his scotch delivered.
Yeah,
we
smoking
see him,
too.
Yeah. Him smoking. He uses some foul language occasionally. That never would have passed muster with Disney had it been done inside, because they felt the need to protect their father in a weird way. But anyway, at Disney, someone inside, an executive, had heard about the script, read it, really liked it, and said, I know we're never going to do this, but you should read it just so we can dismiss it as a company. And, and they essentially said, I think it's, Bob Iger, when Sean Bailey went to him and said, I think it's really good. And Bob Iger, to his credit, said, if you think it's really good, then you should do it.
Wow.
And so when Disney bought it, the trades came out and said, they're just buying it to dump it.
Wow.
They're buying it so they can put it on a shelf so no one will ever make it.
Kind of like Citizen Kane. Didn't somebody offer to buy that and throw it in the garbage?
Yeah. So, but that wasn't their intention. And we got to make the movie. And of course, then you've got, you're always going to have, you have to be kind of rhino skinned, because when you do these things, you're going to have someone who says, how dare you not, paint Walt Disney as an anti-Semite and all this. And it's like, one, the movie's not about Walt Disney, it's about P.L. Travers. And two, we're covering 2 weeks of his life. We're not getting into the union busting and all that. It's not what we're doing here at all. No. So I don't think that's necessarily fair, but people can always find fault. Or, people with, I think New York Times with a review of The Founder, which was well-received movie, said they don't lay a glove on Ray Kroc, and it's like, I don't know what movie you were expecting, but I think we laid plenty of gloves on Ray Kroc.
Of course you did. You let the man hang himself, right? Like it's He
Yeah.
screwed the guys over. I mean, and then, you know, I guess the other problem too, as a director, I mean, how much of this is true and how much of it is interesting? Like how much detail do you go into? And the thing, like, it's always amazed to me, even as a kid, I'd watch a film and there was always a disclaimer at the end. This nothing based on completely fictional characters and related to nobody living and dead, this kind of thing. And in cartoons or whatever it was, I'm like, why are they showing me that in Batman? Like, I know this isn't real. But like you're a person who's willing to stick your foot in the hornet's nest. Like Ray Kroc is, I mean, McDonald's is a huge company. And good for you. And the Alamo, especially, that one's a tough one because you have a lot of people. I guess the reason I mentioned the Alamo is the fact that it's a hot button topic, right? And I don't know, do you have other posters in your I don't know if it's an office or your home? Is there a reason that you do your Zoom calls in front of the Alamo poster?
It just happens to be the one that's behind me, and this is my desk. I've got different ones around, and when I was doing press for the Little Things, for instance, I hung a Little Things poster, but you know, I don't know. It's the right size for the wall. If you were in, you would kind of see it, but no, I mean, I've got lots of Alamo stuff up. I've got a something signed. It's an old from John Wayne's Alamo with John Wayne autograph. Good luck, John Wayne. The way he always signed it. I've got Billy gave me as a wrap gift the twine, the rope that was holding his hands behind him when he was executed. And there's still some of the fake Hollywood blood on it. But he took all that, wrapped it up, and then wrote a nice letter. He said, "These are the ties that bind us forever."
Nice. Very nice. So just in terms of your career, so you start as a director, and do you think that there's an environment now that like there's more opportunity to direct? Like what I was going to say too is you've shifted your career from, I guess Netflix is now a studio. Not I guess, it is. It's just a different distribution outlet.
Yeah.
And are you moving towards Netflix, or is it just that, like, why did you do that project?
Well, to be honest, it's like I knew Scott Stuber, who's the head of the motion picture division at Netflix, because he was the head of production at Universal and he was a producer, and I'd worked with him several times and liked Scott a lot. He's a very smart guy. And we were having trouble, Universal owned The Highwaymen, and they really, really loved the script, but they were having a hard time figuring out how to make the movie work for them in the marketplace. I mean, it's a period piece about two old white guys. And so there were lots of different people who wanted to make it, but it was at a cost that I go, this isn't enough money to do it right. And it wasn't a ton. I mean, it was an inexpensive movie, but still some of the numbers we came from different people who really wanted to make the movie and nice companies and stuff. It just wasn't quite enough. So Netflix, Scott Stuber, before he had been announced in the job, he didn't even have an office yet because they were changing offices. So we met at a hotel and he said, "I want to do The Highwaymen." I was like, okay, great, say yes. And that experience was fantastic. I mean, it's exactly like making a movie for Netflix. It's exactly like making a movie for Warner Brothers, Universal, or Disney, all the way up to the point where the movie's finished and you're starting to talk about marketing. Because obviously streaming, even though, The Highwaymen was in theaters as well as, The Irishman and different Netflix movies are. And, Judas this year and all these different movies. They have a streaming component and a theatrical component. But, they had so much tied into marketing streaming and the different countries and everything else all at once, since the movie drops kind of all at the same time on Netflix, so it's, it's in Brazil, the same time it's in France, the same time it's, in the United States.
Do you like that model better, John?
It's, what, I can make an argument either way. The good part about it is, you're not tied into get that call Friday at 4:00 when your movie opens, because they have the first numbers from the East Coast. And then they extrapolate those numbers and tell you how your movie is doing, how your movie is going to do. And they're usually within the ballpark, 10% or something. So it's hard to work for a year and a half to 2 years on a movie and then get a call on a Friday afternoon, your movie's just opening, you're excited, and they go, sorry, it tanked. So, you know, and then what that does is then they're not going to put as much money into, if the movie's not doing well, they're going to say, well, next weekend, how much money are we putting into advertising it? Let's shift our proceeds over. So that part's good when it's up on Netflix, whatever. You know, the other part is there is a level of excitement to a movie that nobody sees coming as a big success that becomes a big success, like The Blind Side or something. So yeah, I mean, and I don't have, you know, I just did a movie for Warner Brothers and loved the experience. I mean, it was not what any of it counted on in terms of the distribution, but, you know, largely we can thank COVID for that.
Now, the other side of that coin is, so you know if your movie tanked inside of 10 minutes, but you also know if it's done well. And what I read about Netflix is they count a view if you've watched 2 minutes of the film. So it would be hard as a director to know, was it successful or not? I mean, because I think maybe that's the thing. Hollywood judges success on money, did they not?
Yeah, it was interesting because I wanted to know that very thing. And they promised me they would be honest and all that stuff where, you know, it's streaming and subscriptions and those kind of things. When The Highwayman came out, it wasn't 2 minutes. It was their rule of thumb was someone had to watch 2/3 of the movie.
Oh, okay, good. Because they've changed it since then.
They changed that so they could have bigger numbers of people that had watched. But they called after a week and said, the level of success is such that it doesn't have to do anything more for us. It's more than paid for itself. We're all ecstatic. Great. So, you know, in the end, probably 40 to 50 million people saw the movie. Now, you know, how many of them watched 2/3 and how many of them watched all of it? I don't know. But, you know, and then they put it in their quarterly report, which is everybody goes, well, how do you even know that? That could be a lie. And I go, well, it could, except for they just put it in their quarterly report, which means that they can go to jail if it's wrong, if it's a lie. So.
Can I ask you a couple personal questions if I can? I mean, general personal questions. What size TV do you have in your home, or do you have a home theater like a film projector?
I don't have one of those fancy Hollywood, you know, screening rooms or anything. I mean, it's based out of it's off the kitchen, and there's a big living room, and we've got a big wall, and 60 something inches, and, you know, some speakers and surround, but it's not like a knocked out thing. It's got a pretty picture and it sounds good. And usually the way my kids are just now in college, so there was always something on, whether it was a movie or whatever, and people would be watching while they're cooking and doing this. And so it's a more kind of a family thing.
I guess this is the point. Watching on Netflix I bought this 50-inch 4K for the background, for the waterfall, but I do watch movies on there, right? But it's not the same. When I went to see the Alamo, I paid to go, I bought popcorn and a soda, and I sat down and watched. You make big movies. Like a lot of your movies have a big cast. Even The Highwayman, like, you know, you have a lot of people, and they're big vistas, and like the baseball field or whatever. And do you feel as a director that somehow your film is not, you know, going to get the same punch because they're watching it on a 50-inch TV from Walmart?
I think that's true, even though, you know, all these monitors and screens we have at home now are so much better. I think it's more the interruptions and things like that. Yeah. So it's harder to get lost in a movie. So yeah, I mean, I would always love to have people see the movie in a theater. I mean, at the same time, I'm not agnostic about how people see movies, but I understand that, you know, that movie theaters, who goes to the movies? I mean, you know, you do, I do, but there's a whole lot of 15-year-olds that love to go to the mall and the movie theaters, and that's fantastic. But I think they're going to cater to those audiences more. And that's why you get, you know, a Marvel movie every week.
I mean, I guess the thing as a director, would you want, you know, 100 people seeing your movie on a big screen or 1,000 people seeing it at home, right? I think ultimately, I would think.
Yeah, it's weird because there's something that's really invigorating about having a movie at the theater and checking in on it, whether it's The Rookie, The Blind Side, or whatever, checking in on it and and sitting with people that don't know you and you don't know them and listening to their engagement with it.
Yeah.
I can't do that if they're at home watching. So
we have the TIFF. I don't know if you've been to TIFF ever in Toronto, but yeah, I've sat through a bunch of premieres with it's something to watch a movie with the director and the actors in the actual cinema. And if you laugh, they actually hear. George Clooney hears you laugh, you know?
Right.
So I think there's something significant about that. Now, you mentioned The Blind Side, and let's just go. So I had a question for you. We know Sandra Bullock was not your first choice. Julia Roberts was. Sandra went on to win the Academy Award for Best Actress. Mm-hmm. Now, you must have felt good about that, because as a director, you play some role in the way her character is portrayed. Do you not? Like how much of that was your award? 10%, 5%? Like, is it, you just say, do what you want, Sandra, and I'll do nothing?
Well, I mean, what you're doing, it's almost like a sports coach or something. You know, you get talented people, you have conversations about, you know, this is the offense that I think works best for us. And then you put them in a place to succeed. And you kind of help to guide them a little way. You know, it's just like, no. And once they lock in, it's like, I think you can go 15 degrees east here. You know, you're locked in, don't get me wrong, but, or this or that. And so I love the interplay with actors. But, you know, in terms of her voice and all that, I mean, she's from the South, and she got Lee Ann Tui to read every bit of her dialogue.
Really?
So that she could emulate it. And she was just spot on. And we got all of Lee Ann's wardrobe. We took pictures of all her jewelry. We replicated all of it.
Wow. So
that she could become Lee Ann Tui. So mostly, you know, with talented actors, it's about hiring the right person for the job, the person that in your gut, you know, they're going to crush this. And then being supportive and providing an arena that allows them to do their best work.
Now, originally, Sandra turned it down. I think I read she turned it down 3 times because she didn't want to portray a Christian woman. Is what I.
Well, yeah, it's a little. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what is seeped through. I mean, initially it was, I wrote the script. People really liked the script immediately, and I sent it to my agent at CAA, and it got around that weekend. And the next thing you know, I'm meeting with Julia Roberts, even before I got any notes or anything else from Fox, where it was originally set up. And so Fox became excited about it being, you know, it's untitled Julia Roberts project instead of The Blind Side is what it became, because they were really excited to be in business with her for good reason. I mean, she's magnificent. So we had a couple of meetings, and I like Julia a lot. And she got to the point where she said, I think you should go do this movie with someone else, because I've got a movie I'm about to do, you know, that I leave for in 2 weeks. And I've got little kids, and I'm not sure where my head's going to be in 6 months or 9 months. And so she goes, this is really good, and it deserves to be made. So I think that. And so, you know, I thought, well, that was great, you know. And she said also, she goes, I just wouldn't want to, I would want to do right by Lee Ann Tui and not make Lee Ann Tui Erin Brockovich.
Yeah.
And I got that too. It's very fair. And so we parted company. And then, you know, Sandy is someone that I always thought of as, you know, obviously she's a great comedian, but you know, back then she hadn't done a ton of drama, but what drama she had done, I thought she was very, very good in. And I knew that I needed someone, they had to be funny or we were going to fall flat on our face. And I knew she could pull that off. And I knew that the dramatic stuff she would knock out of the park too. So that's when we started meeting and talking, and she loved the script. It was just Lee Ann scared her because she goes, I'm not sure what to do with this character because, you know, sometimes she curses. She has a big ass glass of wine every afternoon.
That's true.
And you know, and she carries a gun around, and it's just, and then she's supposedly this, you know, strong Christian woman that doesn't necessarily fit with the definitions in my head. And I said, look, here's the thing. She's unique. Don't try to stereotype when it comes to Lee Ann. And she had, you know, she has kept having questions. I said, look, Sandy, here's the thing. Let's go visit Lee Ann in Memphis and spend a day with her And then at the end of it, you can go, nope, don't want to do it. But let's do that, because you will have a ball. You will have fun, I promise. So sure enough, we go to Memphis and spend the day with Leanne, and it's crazy like it always is, and fun. And we get to the end of the day, we say goodbye to Leanne, and Sandy says, she terrifies me. And she goes, but I'm old enough now to know that those are the opportunities you lean into. Something that scares you probably has enough weight and merit to warrant you trying, because you know you may fail.
It's interesting to hear you call her Sandy, by the way, because, that's just what you call her. Also interesting too, I was a big Hook fan. I love Steven Spielberg's work, and I had read terrible things about working with Julia Roberts. So I'm glad to hear that she's actually a nice person and good to work with. Because Spielberg said he'll never work with her again, but it might have been a really tough time in her life, and she was playing Tinkerbell. But
I have no idea. She was lovely to me. The few hours I spent with her.
Well, good for you. I'm happy about that. So just to sort of a note as well. So I have a master's degree in theology, and you went to Baylor, which is, I don't know if it still is, but it was a Baptist college. So right. I don't know where your faith is at, but I did read that you didn't, I read that you said you were a Christian, but you didn't take the job because of your faith. It just was a great story. But one thing, you called the school, whatever you called it, I have it here somewhere, but you had a sign up on the arch that you had, it's Matthew 19:26, but you changed the verse.
And it was a mistake. And it was funny because when it came up, because I had written it in, and then when we did it, it was changed. And I don't know that if it was, I had written it incorrectly or if somehow that got translated along, but I kind of fell in love with the idea that it wasn't perfect.
Yeah. Okay, good. Well, that's good. I just wasn't sure if that was deliberate or not. I'm a detail person. And by the way, can I tell you the Highwaymen, I love the detail in you do a lot of period pieces. Your detail is excellent. With one exception. I just spent the last week watching your films. In the Highwaymen, the one guy pulls out a badge that looks like it's from a dollar store, right? Like Special Police. And I'm like, come on, John Lee, you could do better than that. I noticed Woody Harrelson had I collect badges. So I'm like, that's a $12 badge you're showing me. But you do a great job with the costumes. You do a lot of work with Daniel Orlandi. And one of the other things I noticed with you, John Lee, is that you have kind of a cast of people that you work with a lot. Like I see a lot of names like Dennis Quaid, you worked with a few times, Kathy Bates. There's a whole bunch of regular people. And then John Schwartzman, you have him doing your DOP. Here's the question I've never really understood. As a director, the look, is it your look or is it John's look? Who's in, because your film's a lot of movement, a lot of low angles, high angles. You love angles, or somebody does. Close-ups, and it's just the way you drive your story visually, the narrative is impressive. So is that you or John?
It's both. We start early and have so many conversations before we ever start shooting for weeks and weeks and weeks about the look and tone of the picture, the palette we want to use. And then we'll include Michael Kornblith, the production designer.
Yeah.
And Daniel Orlandi.
All your films mostly.
Yeah. And Daniel Orlandi, and the four of us will talk about, because each decision affects the other person. If we're talking about a color palette, obviously we want Michael involved in that and John involved in that, and Daniel, because he's going to be presenting clothes against that color palette or in that color palette. And so, we have long and many discussions. And we'll also have philosophical discussions about movement. How much movement, angles, for the little things, my mantra was from the start, ceilings are more interesting than floors. So there's a whole lot of down looking up. So Michael Kornblith then said, oh, that's great, because now I get to design interesting ceilings instead of just having it, be normal office ceilings. And so he really went toward a more brutalist style of architecture, if you will. And we just said, ceilings are more interesting than floors. So those kind of mantras that we come up with, and we'll always remind ourselves. And also, the camera operator, Ian Fox, on several movies, he's interested too. He'll go, is this more interesting over here? And, it's best idea wins. We come in with a philosophy and a game plan. And then you have to adjust as you go, because everything's not the same as it is in your office when you're on the set. So I would say it's all of us, but I mean, I have to come in at the start with strong ideas, what the visual impact and tone I want to achieve. And it's like I'm doing something now that I'm writing, and I'm already, I just finished writing it, and I've thought about that a lot, so that, if John Schwartzman is able to do the movie, when we sit down the first time, I can bring him into the fold, and then he just explodes with ideas.
It's funny about John Schwartzman. I told you, you and I met briefly on the steps at Ryerson the one time, and I happen to have in my setup here his brother, Robert Schwartzman. I taught years ago. This is something Robert signed for me when he was in Oxford. I taught him when he was a film student, but he talked about his brother, John, because he had learned some shooting from John. And I guess John did a lot of stuff with Nick Cage and the sort of connections that way.
They're related too.
Yeah, I knew that.
They're Coppolas,
Yeah, it's the whole thing. But it's interesting because I guess once you find people you like working with, and they sort of finish your sentences, they know your look. Like you've got that Alamo poster behind you, and the tone and the color of the poster is very similar to the color of the films. A lot of sunsets, a lot of warm colors. Right. And that's, whether it's you or Schwartzman, your films have an excellent look. Like it's a great story told well, right? And like I teach technical things as well at Ryerson, but so I appreciate good continuity. I guess with sports, is it multiple cameras when you're doing football and baseball? That has to be to get the continuity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You throw as many cameras as you can at it. And when you're an inexpensive movie, you don't have as many as you'd like, for sure. But cameras have gotten, less expensive in terms of rentals, and you work with them and you say, we're going to keep, because a lot of my movies are single camera, and you're just going setup to setup, but you'll get an allowance to keep a second camera body on the truck. And don't charge us when we're not using it, but be honest. And when we break it out of the truck and use it, then charge us for that day. And John has a relationship with Panavision that goes back so many years that they go, yeah, sure, take it.
Well, it's your reputation too, right? And John's what he's doing Jurassic Park stuff now too. He's become quite successful as well, hasn't he?
He's really, yeah. I mean, I was really fortunate to cross paths. Oh, just one thing I should say is Dean Simler shot the Alamo. John, and who's brilliant, shot Dances with Wolves as well. And he's just
sorry, brilliant. I did know that, but I know that you've used Schwartzman for a bunch of other things.
Many.
I also noticed I watched the making of the Alamo, and there was that one shot where was it a spider camera or something where you did the point of view of the cannonball?
Yeah.
Right. Which was, I think.
It was fun. I remember Terry Malick came out because he lives in Austin, and I knew Terry a little bit through Mark Johnson, our producer. And so invited Terry and his wife, Eki, to come out and visit the set whenever they wanted. And he was just starting to think about directing again because he had had a long hiatus. And so he came out and got so involved with having everyone explain exactly how the spider cam worked. And he was great. And he came out several times.
So certainly there's power in the images, and there's power in storytelling. Yeah. And again, I'm just conscious of time here, but I just was going to ask you to maybe some other things in terms of when you're telling a story. What is it that you look for when you think, like, why did you tell Leanne's story and not someone else's story? Is it just stories that come your way? Is it opportunity? Or are you out, like when you go to the Kmart or whatever, do you think, well, there's an interesting, like, are you always looking?
Well, I mean, like you said earlier, I forget who exactly said it, but I think Flannery O'Connor was one of the ones who said it. Was something like, there are 13 stories in existence, and we keep retelling them over and over as though they never existed. And she didn't mean that in anything negative or they were boring. It's just when somebody comes and they say, do you think this is a movie? And I go, everything is a possible movie in the right hands and someone who sees what that movie is. And sometimes, I just go, I don't see it as a movie. It doesn't mean it's not a movie. I mean, somebody might look at Nomadland and go, what? That's a movie? And it's a movie. it took somebody to kind of look at it in a unique way. But yeah, it's just got to be one of those things that I've got to be emotionally interested. And I'm going to be working on it for 2 years, and you're going to spend part of that time waking up at 4:30 in the morning. And I don't like to do that. So it has to be something that is emotionally engaging for me to keep my interest going.
And I think too, John Lee, what I was saying too about the costumes, like we're talking about John Schwartzman's work with or other people you've worked with as well, their look of the film, the use of motion and camera movement and all the push-ins and all the rest of it. How much like latitude do you give your people, right? Like you'd say to John, this is the look I want for the film. You give Daniel a lot of leeway. And then like, have you ever come to a situation where you say it just, no? Or are you with the point with your people where you're pretty into?
Yeah, no, you have all these discussions, but yeah, there are times when you go, I know we talked about shooting it this way. It feels like we ought to be over here. Or this shot doesn't feel like our movie. Let's scrap that one. Let's do something over here instead. I mean, and nobody ever gets offended because he'll do the same thing to me sometimes. We'll have something and he'll go, I know we talked about this, but what if we did this from behind them and did our coverage from behind instead of in front, even though we talked about it? And when I said, you know what, that's a really interesting idea. Let's do that. And it's the same with everything. I mean, you'll have, from a production design standpoint, sometimes you'll go, that thing on that desk, or it's more like set deck and things like that. You go, okay, that's bugging me. My eye's going to that. Get rid of that. Get rid of this. This desk is too cluttered, or this isn't cluttered enough. So on the day, you're there trying to make it as real as possible.
Like your $10 badge in the highway.
Hey, I'm not responsible for badges.
I didn't think you were. And the thing is, it's one of those things. It's sort of like what Billy Bob was saying about the hat he was wearing him, or he's wearing the hat, and how it takes away from the story. And I think that's the thing, is that period pieces are tough. They're really tough, right? Because you're dealing with like airplanes and, like imagine in Texas, like you're shooting all digital now, right? So
yeah, I mean, the last couple of movies I've shot digital before that was filmed, but all your VFX, we had for The Highwayman something like 600 VFX shots. And you'd go, wait a minute, it's not a monster movie. It's not a Marvel movie. What are you using all those shots for? And you're using them because you're recreating 1934. And you go, what? You go, there's only so much you can do, where you go, we've got this block and we've dolled it all up with the street front signs and everything. We don't have enough money to take down. We can't afford to take down the Transformers. You can't do that. So we end up just coming in and erasing. So out of those shots, almost all of them were erasing. In the distance, what am I looking at? Is that a white plastic bag blowing across the street? Those weren't in existence. Get rid of it.
It's interesting that you tried. I was thinking of with Spielberg and Raiders of the Lost Ark in Cairo, they had to take all the TV antennas down for the back shot, right?
Yeah. Now they would erase them, but.
Yeah, no, I guess that's the easy part. But there's a thing. Well, you always forget one. So there's, you see an antenna in the background. Do you think that the technical part of filmmaking is like how much of it do you understand? Is it like where's your skill source? You're a storyteller. Do you rely on your people to say, this is how this works? Like you talked about, like, say, the spider cam. Was that your idea? Did somebody bring it to you? How much technical knowledge do you need to be a director these days? Do you set the lenses with John, or how does that work?
No, and what I'll do, sometimes you'll go, no, I really want it wide. Give me a 12 or a 17 on the sandbag. But more importantly is they know more than I do about it. I'm never going to catch up to John Schwartzman in terms of camera and lenses and all that. And also I can't act. I'm a terrible actor. So the last thing I should do is try to tell someone how to act. But what I can convey is the visual story I want to tell, or the tone and those kinds of things. So, I'm more likely to go with John to go, can we go wider? Let's just go wider. I want to feel the entire bridge. So then and to him, that means, he's like, okay, give me a 35 and let's back up to here and put and let's look at it and see what it looks like. So you want them, I can't do any of their jobs as well as they do them. So what I can do is help tell them tell the story.
Do you shoot differently for, say, Netflix than you would for, say, the Alamo at a movie theater?
No, I mean, people ask that because they go, well, 90% of the people that see it are going to be watching it on their monitor. And I don't make any concessions. I still do it for what it's going to look like in a theater. And hopefully people at home have a large enough monitor that they'll capture some of that scope, but no.
So that's your style. This is what we're doing. We're not going to be shooting for smartphones anytime soon. We're going to be shooting.
No, that would defeat me.
John Lee, I know you said you get busy at 3 o'clock. I don't want to be disrespectful of your time. If you
no. This is great. I probably should get going. My phone's blowing up here. I'm trying to put out a fire, so I should probably go.
So if I can just ask two last questions. One, can I be in one of your movies when you do a historical thing? I would love to be a background player. That's kind of a joke, but not really. But just finally, two, your favorite movie and where you see yourself going, if you can, where's John Lee's next step?
I don't know what my next step is. I mean, I just adapted a Stephen King novella.
I did see that. Yeah.
Which is more in the vein of a Stand By Me than It or Cujo or something. You know, it's less of the horror. It's got a creepy factor to it. But yeah, and I'm doing that for Netflix. I don't know. I mean, I just whatever story kind of you feel like you have something to say with. And I don't have a master career plan about, I need to do this and then this and then this. I've always just kind of been unexpected in a weird way, whatever path you're going to be on. So I don't know. I try not to repeat myself too much. So if I feel like, this is good, but it feels like I've done this before, then I know I'm not talented enough to direct a movie unless I'm all in. I'm just, I can't just glide through it. I've got to be invested in it sincerely. So,
but you're in a good place now in your career. I mean, I don't know what you've made. I haven't bothered to look up what you're worth. So you're not the same guy that you were at the beginning. You're not just doing commercials to pay the bills. You're probably quite comfortable financially, although I think you need a bigger TV. 66 is just too small. Okay. But you're in a place where you have some choice, right? Yeah. So what would you say to someone, just final thought, what would you say to someone who wants to start? They wouldn't do it the way you did. Is there make films, film festivals, just sort of start little projects, direct theater?
Be excited. Find that excitement with other people that are like-minded. I think that is really important, because you can, if you're just by yourself, sometimes you can get down on something, and it's a lot of fun to have an excitement level with other people about a project, and you can feed each other in that way. So I'm a big proponent of that. I talk to college students studying film and everything else a lot, and it's just that esprit de corps that you have, with others that love stories as much as you do, and that have your best interest at heart too, whether you're working with them on a project or you're just giving them a script because you want them to read it and talk about it. Finding those people that have your best interest at heart and that have the joy that you do for storytelling.
Which is why you work with a lot of the same people. And it's probably, if they're fun to work with and you enjoy working with them, you look forward to the next project.
Always. It's a lot of fun.
I guess you're disappointed if you go to do a project, say John's not available. And I don't know if Daniel waits around for you or if he just does other things, and if he's available, he'll work with you. But
these guys all, work nonstop. So it's just, I try to figure it out as best I can. I'll let them know, for instance, send them an email and go, okay, it looks like there may be something happening in November, just letting you know. And then they'll get back to me and say, I'm going to take this other job here because I'll be finished before then and whatever. So they do their best to try to do it, but it's just not going to happen because I don't go back-to-back movies. I can't keep them working. I mean, because I usually, after I direct a movie, it's especially this last one and then COVID and everything else, it was like needed some time just to write. So,
you must have an understanding wife or partner.
She's great. She's fantastic. and she understands it when I go off to do a movie. It's, you know, I'm leaving town almost always. And then, you know, but then when I'm home, when I'm writing, I'm around a whole lot more. So I go from being, you know, the partner who's, you know, never around to the partner that's around too much. So
sounds like a friend of mine whose husband was in the Navy on submarines, was gone for 6 months and then there for 6 months. So
yeah.
Well, thank you for your time today, sir. You didn't tell me what your favorite movie was.
Oh, it's a rotating list, probably like yours. I don't know, but I mean, there are probably 20 different movies that find some way through the rotation. I really fell in love with movies from the 70s, and so like for instance, for me, I think The Conversation is Coppola's best movie. I love The Conversation so much.
Gene Hackman, isn't it?
Yeah, Gene Hackman, Harrison Ford, Robert Duvall.
I just watched that recently, actually.
Terry Garr. Yeah.
You meet all these people now too. It must be kind of a thrill when you meet a Coppola or somebody who was one of your heroes growing up.
Yeah, you're a little like that. That's true. But I mean, I also love Michael Ritchie's films from the 70s. I love, my company's named after a line of dialogue from Badlands, so I should probably put Terry Malick in there. I think Badlands is pretty terrific. I really love, my favorite Kirk Douglas movie is Lonely Are the Brave, which I think is just a great movie. I watch
Great actor.
Yeah. Let's see, who else? Oh, The Verdict. I just watched for the probably 100th time about a month ago with my son. Yeah. I love The Verdict and Lumet movies, you know. As
a lawyer, do you like the Grisham films? The Firm is one of my favorites.
I like them. I like them. Yeah. I do like them. I mean, the thing about legal films is that you kind of have to break the rules, and there's a part of it as a lawyer that makes me go, well, that would never happen. That would never happen. So I have a little bit of a problem just as a viewer. You know, you've always got lawyers who get up out of their chairs and walk over to the person they're asking questions of and go right up to the jury and talk. And you go, well, you're not allowed to do any of that. It's like almost what if I had a baseball movie with 15 people on the field? Well, no, there's 9, you know.
Wait, but doesn't that ruin all movies for you? Because you're a director, so you know how stuff's done. Are you able to suspend that part?
I pretty much am. I mean, unless somebody is really showing off with the camera, that can take me out sometimes. Take me out of a movie.
Does your wife ever hit you and say, "Come on, John Lee, just be quiet"? Right?
I'm pretty quiet through movies. I mean, you know, I don't talk a lot through them. I'll just watch them. You know, my wife is more to talk through the movie than I am.
What's your favorite movie that you directed?
You like them all, you know. I would say probably the best time I had was on The Rookie, because I was sure that I was going to be fired, you know.
Oh.
I mean, you go through that first week, you go, please just make it through a week because they're less likely to fire you then, and cut bait. And they were looking at dailies. But the great thing about it was we had a bunch of us. It was a little tiny movie. Disney forgot about us. I mean, they looked at the first week of dailies and said, yeah, they look great, and then forgot about us. And so we were left to our own devices down in a small, you know, Texas town, and we played baseball at lunch every day. We would break for lunch, and everybody would just go grab a sandwich in their glove and go play baseball. It was fun.
John Lee, I'm so sorry I can't take you for lunch. I'm sure you're too busy anyways, but I certainly appreciate your time. And if I have more questions, do you mind if I send them off to you?
Nope, send them off.
And I will, at the same time, I'm going to look for some material for you that you might be interested in.
Yeah.
And just as a Parker fan, because I think we both are.
Sounds great, Gary. Appreciate it.
Thank you so very much, fine sir. I appreciate it. And thank you for the beautiful work that you do. Your movies inspire me. So.
Oh, thanks for checking them out. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you again, John Lee. Have a great day. And thanks for your time. Yeah. Cheers.